We have the floor crossing by Chris d'Entremont that happened on Tuesday when we last spoke, joining the government, and now Matt Jeneroux is resigning his seat entirely, saying that that this wasn't an easy decision, but it is the right one. The effect is he's not leaving caucus, but he's leaving his seat. The effect is that Pierre Poilievre now has two people who have left, regardless of the timing. Chantal, what do you make of it?
Well, that this is not the week that Pierre Poilievre wanted to have, that instead of being on the attack on the budget, he is in such crisis mode that he actually forgot to add the usual official opposition motion to strike down the budget, which tells you a lot about what's happening inside, which is chaos. What I'm told is it's very toxic in there. Yesterday, the name of this MP who just resigned was going around as someone who was thinking of crossing the floor. There is plenty of indications that he was under intense pressure to not cross the floor. This is the answer. If you're a leader of the official opposition on budget week in a minority government and you lose two MPs one way or the other, it doesn't bode well for your leadership.
Yeah, Althea, what are you hearing? Because it definitely raises questions about what the leader is doing with caucus, how involved he is in keeping people happy and on side.
Well, since the rumors first started of potential floor crossers, he has been working the phones, but I would say he does not have good and warm relations. He has not fostered collegial relations with his caucus in the same way that some people speak about Brian Mulroney, for example. And so when there is a crisis, there's no goodwill built in there, and that has been a problem that we've seen all week. I don't believe that Chris d'Entremont wanted to cross the floor in the way that happened on Tuesday. He was forced to do so because of a Politico story that emerged earlier than he had expected. And from what I understand from several sources, Mr. Jeneroux was planning on crossing to the Liberals, and multiple sources, conservative sources, tell me that he was threatened by his own whip, and that I haven't spoken to him directly, so I won't go into the details, but I believe that instead of crossing the floor, he just basically said, fine, if this is the way you want to deal with it, then I will resign my seat. Some conservatives believe that the Liberals will win that by-election whenever it is called. It certainly is a good week for Mark Carney. To Chantal's point, what does it mean? I mean, Mr. d'Entremont left and said, basically, it's because of Pierre Poilievre's toxic leadership, and I don't see the values that I believe in reflected in at least the leadership's tone in the party. Mr. Jeneroux, aside from saying that he wants to spend more time with his family, doesn't really tell us why he is leaving, so we don't know yet why he is leaving. I'm sure at some point he will tell us. But what does it mean for Pierre Poilievre's leadership review in January? What does it mean for the rest of the caucus? If the story is emerging about the pressure that you're under by the leadership team, how does that build and foster a team approach? You now have very aggressive tone. You're leading through fear. And it's hard to lead through fear when you're, frankly, the leader of the official opposition, you know? There aren't that many carrots, but how do you sustain this? And there's a lot of unhappy people, and I would gotta say, dispirited-looking faces in that caucus.
Andrew?
I'll leave my colleagues to handle the inside dope. I'll just say I'm more struck by the public reactions, which I think are symptomatic of what's going wrong here. The reaction to Chris d'Entremont moving over was, who needs him? He's a red Tory. We don't need that kind in our party. That is all too symptomatic of the attitudes of the people around Pierre Poilievre, that there's a very narrow construction of what's an acceptable conservative. I'm somebody who's always thought that conservatives need to establish more distance between themselves and the Liberals and take a more concrete and substantive and substantively conservative stance. But I also think any party that has any chance of winning has to be a big tent. And if you're focused on who you can exclude from the tent rather than who you can bring into it, you're going to lead yourself to a lot of trouble. Look at the frosty relations he has with the governments of conservative governments in Ontario and Nova Scotia, because there's personalities involved as well and ambitions, but also ideological differences. Look at some of the bizarre candidate shows where they froze out Mike DeJong in BC from running. They need to have a much more broad outlook. But I think also the thing, when you look at Pierre Poilievre's comportment, he seems to be reacting as if he was still 25 points ahead in the polls, and as if the Reform Act provisions had not been adopted by his caucus, where he can be removed if they so choose. So, we can talk about the January review of the party at large, but is he going to make it to the January review?
Yeah, I think the problem is they want to be talking about the budget, and they say to media, why you're talking about the budget. We will talk about the budget in the next block, but if you yourself can't keep the party talking about the budget, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing. I have to respond to what's unfolding, and it is a certain amount of distress and drama in that caucus right now. Chantal.